Hello and welcome to edition number 8, episode number 8, volume 8 of Question and Answer. And I am your host, Panyo Basa. And we were having kind of a lull in question asking, and then all of a sudden I put the announcement up on Subscribestar, and a certain good fellow named Dog Breath just unleashed this merciless onslaught of questions. So it's going to be a long one again, it looks like. And so I better just get to it. Let's answer questions. So the first one is from Nardi, and he asks the perennial question, what happens after death? Kind of good question people have been asking since prehistoric times. And the easy answer to that is what happens after death is probably pretty similar to what happened before you were born. So all you got to do is just remember what happened before you were born, and just maybe give a slightly more developed version of that. Hopefully, if you've lived a good life and made progress, you'll have a slightly more developed version of that after you die. And if you don't remember what happened before you're born, that's just too bad for you. But I think the more orthodox answer will be given a little very soon, actually, because he continues on in this same vein. So the next question by Nardi is, how does incarnation to the next life happen? And from my own personal experience, I really don't have personal experience with regard to what happens in between lives or in past lives or in an afterlife, because technically speaking, it won't be me anymore. I mean, there'll be like underlying, like you could call it maybe an underlying mental essence or something, but I mean, I'll have a different brain, probably will not identify with this meat puppet anymore. So yeah, as far as us individually is concerned, then to some degree the atheistic materialists would be right, and we just stop existing. Although, yeah. Anyway, I'll just deal with the orthodox answer here. And so, how does incarnation to the next life happen? Going with orthodox Theravada Buddhism, the very moment after your mental processes cease in this life, they necessarily have to arise somewhere else. So, also in Theravada Buddhism, that would generally occur at the moment of conception. So, as soon as you die, going with orthodox theory, orthodox dogma, orthodox scripture, then yeah, it's called rebirth linking consciousness. So as soon as your mental states cease at the moment of death in this life, then the very next moment you would have, I mean, that consciousness would have to find like some kind of backup into another existence, because there can't be more than just one split second of a gap. So yeah, in a way, it's sort of like going with like Isaac Newton. It's just like the law of conservation of mental energy or something. If you've still got this imbalance going in this life, like a karmic imbalance, hasn't all worked itself out yet, then just because the container for that mental imbalance stops working, the mental imbalance just has to continue until it works itself out sooner or later. So it's just going to have to appear somewhere else. And it's an infinitely big universe. And so there shouldn't be too much problem, I assume, finding the right circumstances for the karmic continuum or karmic momentum to continue unabated until sooner or later it gets worked out and we become enlightened. So yeah, it would just be the karma, the stream of karma, which is really all that reincarnates, or all that transmigrates, or whatever you want to call it. Some Buddhists have an issue using the word reincarnation, which I really don't see a problem with that. But yeah, all that goes from one life to the next is karma, which is like the momentum of your mental states. And it's generally in a state of imbalance, which is causing it to be dynamic. Because if it wasn't in a state of imbalance, then yeah, I mean, it wouldn't necessarily have to continue or anything. It would just be all worked out. So let's see. Next question from Nardi, also on the same theme. Do we have a sort of purgatory or limbo to spend some time, or do we go directly from one life to the other through our last thought? And like in Tibetan Buddhism, they have like the bardo, which is an intermediate state. Or a lot of people who have near-death experiences, they will describe, first rising up and going towards the bright light, and then they meet like a spirit guide who sort of gives them a review of their past life, and then they have to make decisions, or maybe they're just told they have to go back because they're not done yet, or something like that. But in Buddhism, even if there is like an intermediate state, that would count as just an existence. I mean, there is no in-between state. You have to go from this existence. After this existence ends, the very next moment, another existence has to start, because there can't be a real gap. And there are some philosophical problems with that I have discussed elsewhere, but we needn't wade into that particular issue, because we've got lots of questions to answer here. But yeah, I mean, it could be that you've got strange karma, or you just got like this one little thing that needs to get worked out. And so the next life might just be like a brief spirit existence, or maybe even just you just take existence as an embryo that then gets aborted, or like a miscarriage or something happens. Anything like that can happen. But even like the intermediate, like a bardo realm, would technically, from the Buddhist point of, or the Theravada Buddhist point of view, would be something like a spirit realm that just doesn't last for very long. So next question. Don't you think that by disrobing you could delete all your development? Delete? No, not really. I mean, I could be working off some of the good karma. I've been earning merit through my monk's life, and it may be that the little minor heaven realm of a lovely lady or something could, I'd be like paying for that. Just how do you say, sort of using karmic money, so sort of my part of my cash in would be that, or something, or just eating good food, that kind of thing, sort of like the way heaven is supposed to work. I mean, at a much larger scale, you got all this merit built up, and then you get into the heaven realms, and supposedly you just wallow in sensuality and joy and bliss until it's all used up, and then back down you go into the human realm or something. But the question, I mean, the assumption seems to be that after I stop being a fully ordained bhikkhu, I'm just going to stop making any kind of progress. And I don't think that that's going to be the case. It may be a different kind of progress, or it may be slowed down or something, because being a monk really does facilitate certain kinds of progress. But I got as far as I could with that, it seems like. And so it's time to make progress along different lines if I'm going to continue making progress. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm going to continue practicing Dhamma. How well I'll be practicing it remains to be seen. But yeah, it's not going to delete all of my development. And I mean, people can still make progress, and people can even become enlightened without being ordained bhikkhus or nuns, or whatever they're ordained as. So yeah, I don't think I'm going to be deleting very much, other than just the bhikkhu part at the end of my name. I can still be called Panyobasa, I just won't be Panyobasa Bhikkhu. All right, next question. Last question from Nardi. If you die at 80 years old in, let's say, a bad mental state, don't you think it will vanish all your 30 years trial of staying out of samsara? Well, I mean, if you die in bad mental states, no matter how old you are, then, I mean, that's going to have an effect. Your very last mental state is the most important one of your life because it determines your, like, your trajectory, your momentum going into the next existence, which we can get to a little later. There are a few more questions along these lines. But yeah, it's not going to vanish all my 30 years trial of staying out of samsara. And yeah, the staying out of samsara, I'm not exactly sure what is meant there. Some people just make this assumption that being a monk is not being in samsara, but it is. Even like the highest formless realms, you know, the most subtle of all the heaven realms are still samsara. So long as there's any kind of individual existence, it is samsara. So yeah, if I died in bad mental states, that would influence my trajectory going into the next life, but it wouldn't change my karma very much. You know, there's like this accumulated stream or accumulation of karma that, you know, just one bad mental state isn't going to just poof all of that out of existence. So, yeah, let's just hope that when we die, we all have relatively good mental states, which is very important, and I'll get back to that. So the next question is from Unseen Perspectives. Can you recommend an easy way for English-speaking lay people to cultivate an interest in learning the Dhamma? And then in parentheses, he says, in my opinion, the word of the Buddha and those thick books translated by Bhikkhu Bodhi are too cryptic for lay people with a casual interest in Buddhism and short attention spans. Yeah, well, I mean, the casual attitude and the short attention span is a hindrance, and it could effectively prevent some people from really being introduced to something that could help them a lot, but really that is our own doing. But getting back to the question here, an easy way for English-speaking lay people to cultivate an interest in learning the Dhamma, I assume for a lot of people, just pointing out the pragmatic benefits. Like some people, maybe like even in a hospital setting, they can be taught mindfulness techniques to help them cope with stress or some kinds of mental illnesses or just chronic pain or the fear of death. Maybe they have like a terminal case of something, and there are a lot of hospitals that are teaching essentially Buddhist meditation or mindfulness to help them detach from the pain or detach from the worry or detach from like the obsessive compulsive urges, that kind of thing. And so emphasizing just the pragmatic benefits to pragmatic lay people could be good. And I mean, just coping with stress, I think that's probably the main reason why people even learn Buddhist meditation nowadays. I remember once I was giving an introductory instruction to beginning meditators at a Dharma hall, and just out of curiosity, I asked the beginning, just the people there, why they wanted to learn meditation, and the most common answer was just coping with stress, and it does work. And there will be another question or two along these lines farther down. But that would be one of the main ways of getting, you know, worldly minded lay people interested in Buddhism, is just pointing out the actual real life benefits of less stress and greater happiness or contentment. Just teaching ethics could work for some people, because that also is conducive to serenity and peace of mind. And some people would just be interested in the philosophy. Philosophically minded people could really take an interest in that too. Or another way of getting some English-speaking lay people to cultivate an interest would be like young men who are looking for some way of asserting their masculinity, which it might seem kind of strange because Buddhism is considered to be kind of like compassionate and nonviolent, and thereby like stereotypically feminine in certain respects. But the austerity of it and just the fearlessness that it teaches, um, it is a way of like tapping into the divine masculine without having to actually go out and shed blood, that kind of thing. So for that also, I think there is potential for like young men who are really trying to come to grips with their own masculinity, which is just like demonized in Western civilization now, which is just totally degenerate and sick. Um, yeah, I mean that would be another way also. But so for different people, there would be different ways. But I assume just the pragmatic benefits you can get, not just theoretical stuff, but actual, on the ground results. Um, I think that would be the best way of going about it. So next question is from Average Dud, alias Average Dude, who says it would be really great to list all the times nirvana is described, especially the ones where it's described as infinite consciousness. Oh, and are the 31 planes told in the sutras too? Well, um, yeah, to list all the times nirvana is described, I'd be sitting here for more than half an hour just going over it. Um, there are some interesting descriptions. There's one in the Udana, and unfortunately, I forgot to have the reference here to just blurt it out to you. But the ones where it's described as infinite consciousness, there are two main ones. One is in Diga 11, which is the Kewata Sutta, I think, and then one is in Majjhima Nikaya number 49. And they both have the same strange explanation, which I happen to have right here. Consciousness unmanifest, infinite, shining all around. Here water and earth, fire and wind gain no foothold. Here long and short, small and large, pleasant and unpleasant. Here name and form without remainder are completely stopped. So that is found in two suttas. It's a very ancient text. And in Pali, it's Vinyanam Anidasanam Anandam Sabado Pabam Eta Apo Cha Patavi Tejo Vayo Nagadadi. That's like the beginning part of it. But Vinyanam Anidasanam means like unmanifest consciousness. And it's pretty obviously referring to Nibbana. And there are similar texts that say kind of similar things. Like there's another text that refers to consciousness being luminous or just shining forth, and that our unenlightenment is caused by extraneous defilements kind of blocking the shine of the consciousness. And that's in the Samyutta, I think. And again, I don't remember the exact citation, but yeah, it wasn't orthodox. It's a really old description which fell by the wayside and probably got turned into a formless jhana as kind of a consolation prize. But yeah, infinite consciousness is also how Brahman is described in some of the Upanishads, like formless infinite consciousness. And of course, God is described in much the same terms in some theological schools. So it didn't work very well in Theravada Buddhism because the Theravada Buddhists just developed this idea that Nibbana just should not be reified. It should not be even called a thing and where you try to describe it as something, because then you've just dragged it down into phenomenal existence. So it's best just to leave it completely off the scale. The Buddha usually didn't talk about it much except in negations. It's not this, it's not that. And even in the famous quote where it's just talking about no wind, earth, fire, water, it's like none of the elements, there's no light or darkness, it's just this kind of paradoxical, unthinkable state. And let's see, with regard to the 31 planes, if I'm not exactly sure if all 31 of them are specifically mentioned, but most of them are generally in passing. So, there's mentions of non-returners going up into the divine abodes, and or not the divine abodes, but maybe it is the divine abodes. It's not the Brahma Viharas, but it's like the highest uh, realms of the non-formless Brahmas. They're reserved for non-returners. There's mention of all of lots of these different realms, although I don't think there is one sutta that just systematically lists off all the 31 planes of existence. You kind of have to hunt and search for them, unless you just want to read something that isn't scripture, just like a review or something. Like I wrote an article on the 31 planes of existence. It's on the nipapancha.org website. So the next question is from Woke Wotan. Oh, before I do that, I just will say again that if you want the description of nirvana as infinite consciousness, it would be in the Digha 11, which is the Kewata Sutta, or Majjhima 49, which is the Brahma something Sutta. In fact, I don't have the book here. Yeah, I don't have the book, so never mind. Okay, getting back to Woke Wotan. He says, asking for a friend when entering stores without a face mask and getting requested to wear one, this friend simply replies with, "Don't wear them because of medical reasons." This is a lie, because his real reason is he doesn't want to comply with, in his eyes, absurd, useless, tyrannical mandate, as doing so is typical herd mentality that actually hurts society. He knows from experience that telling the truth about his reason not to wear one often only leads to fruitless discussions and frustration on both ends. Plus, he risks getting refused entrance to the store. He wants to maintain good mental states. In a way, he feels not wearing a face mask because of aforementioned reasons is similar to claiming conscientious objection to military service, but without being open about it, because arguing with NPCs is pointless. When playing computer games, one doesn't try to chat with an in-game NPC about the weather after receiving a quest either. Does him lying influence his karma in any way? Well, the short answer to that is yes, because if you're lying, it's still lying regardless of your reasons. I assume, the reasons can mitigate the lie, but it's ultimately still lying. So maybe if he wanted to play it a little more careful, he could think up some actual medical reasons, like he just doesn't like being oxygen depleted or something, or whatever. Like with well, I suppose fogging up his glasses so that he can't see could theoretically be a medical reason that he doesn't want to discuss, because when your glasses are fogged up, you could like bump into something and hurt yourself. But if he doesn't wear glasses, then he might have to go get some. But yeah, this is one reason why there are monks, is that if you live a worldly life, it's damn near impossible to follow the 5 precepts perfectly. And lying is the easiest precept to break. And just to be polite in a civilized society requires you to be a damned liar sometimes, even if it's just white lies. You say you're sorry when you're not sorry, and you say I'd like to, but I can't, when actually you can, you just don't want to, and on and on. So yeah, in his case, it could be just the lesser of 2 evils. Sometimes you have to choose the lesser of 2 evils. So that might be the case in his case. So he's just taking a small hit. It's not like you're going to burn in hell for something like that. Like you're not going to burn in hell for swatting a mosquito. And sometimes you just have to figure out what is most suitable. It's like, are you willing to take a little bit of a hit for some other benefit? So yeah, but the short answer is that he is still speaking with the intention of deceiving somebody, and it is going to be it is going to have karmic effects. Somebody is probably going to tell him some little white lie in the future or something to balance it out, or whatever. But I can't really endorse lying. Like just recently, I was advised that all I'd have to do after I'm not a monk anymore is just say that I've been unemployed for 2 years because of the Lung Pao Sicken pandemic, and I could collect like $20,000 in like socialist back pay. But the whole idea of lying like that really does not appeal to me at all, and I would be very reluctant to do something like that. So anyway, next question is from Ken. Why not innovate and start a tradition that is compatible with Western values? Um, yeah, that's a good question. I have been thinking about that a lot. Um, Part of the thing for me is that I'm an individualist, and I'm not really kind of a tribal person, and not really like even belonging to like a political party. It seems like most people are followers, so it doesn't really matter what their political party does. They just take the side of that anyway. And I could never really relate to that. It's like, well, I mean, this policy I approve of, but that one I don't. And so I just kind of make up my own mind. And I'm just an individualist by nature. So, I mean, I can work out something that works for me and share it with other people, and maybe it'll work for them too. But like becoming the leader of a movement, yeah, I'd have to have that greatness thrust upon me, I think, because I'm not going to be really seeking it. But if I find something that works for me, because I am going to be working for some kind of compromise or some kind of innovation that works in my case. Because I'm not just going to just dive into the world and start flipping burgers as a total normie. So I will be looking for something like that. And if it works for me, it could work for other people also. And who knows, maybe it'll be popular and strike traction. And in my case, um, the obvious choice would be some kind of, I wouldn't want to call it a reform movement necessarily, but a kind of compromise movement of Theravada Buddhism with the West, without wallowing in the white elitism of the Vipassana, like the IMS style or a spirit rock style Buddhism. But there's another idea I just was playing with. Excuse me. I just had lunch a little while ago. Um, this other idea is I had this idea of like neo-cynicism. Like the ancient cynics, the famous Diogenes who lived in the tub. And it was about as close to Buddhist monasticism as existed in classical Western culture, the cynics, the cynic philosophers. And in some ways, it was better suited to the West than like monastic Theravada, because they weren't required to be celibate, because the cynics considered like sexual desire to be just a natural desire, like desire for food or desire for sleep. And so they really didn't see that as something to forbid. And also they were allowed to handle money, although of course they didn't have very much of it, because in their case they tended to be just sort of wandering mendicants or something. But I was I was considering it, not like I've made up my mind or anything, but just taking like a synthesis of some of the best of like the ancient cynical philosophy, and also Buddhism, just adding a lot of Buddhism or to the cynicism, or adding a lot of cynicism to the Buddhism, and forming like this neo-cynical movement. And just the title, I mean, I could write a book sort of like the Bronze Age mindset, like the neo-cynic manifesto, something like that, um, which might turn off the Buddhists, even though it would have a lot of Buddhism in it. But we'll just see how it goes. But that's one of my ideas for innovation and starting a tradition that is compatible with Western values, like Ken here has asked me about. So I'll just put it out there. And Ken's second question is, what is so wrong with free market capitalism that I can't just pay a monk cash to teach me something? I assume maybe that's like a rhetorical question, but the main, it's not anything wrong with free market capitalism. It's more a matter of restrictions on Buddhism or Dhamma or Dharma. Like monks just aren't allowed to handle money, so that's makes it forbidden right there. But also, there's another issue that I consider is that Dhamma really should be free of charge. That, I mean, it should just be free to all beings. Everyone should have access to it. And so I really don't like the idea of charging money for pure Dhamma. Like if I translated something from Pali into English, like my Atthakavagga translation, I would feel really uncomfortable with charging money for that because it is Dhamma. Although my own strange philosophical ideas, I guess, are fair game, so I can monetize those, I suppose. But on the other hand, people want to donate, people want to support me or any other Dhamma teacher, then yeah, you gather up treasures in heaven for the generosity, even from the Orthodox point of view. So next question is from Johnny Anan, who is a frequent viewer on BitChute. And Johnny Anan asks, how does a Buddhist know if he has hypnotized himself or is in deep meditation, and what is the difference? And that is a good question because a lot of meditators just can't tell the difference. In fact, a lot of like Burmese meditation instructors and probably a lot of Western meditation instructors, especially like the New Agey ones, just cannot tell the difference. They just hypnotize themselves, go into a deep trance, and think that they're in jhana or some such. But samadhi is not all sama samadhi. And so, yeah, that is a good question. So one handy rule of thumb is if you're meditating and you go into a deep state so that you're just oblivious to everything around you. You do not hear the ticking of the clock. You do not feel the mosquito biting you. You know, you don't hear the phone ringing. You don't hear anyone knocking on the door. You're just like completely oblivious to everything outside your mind. Then in all likelihood, you are in a trance state. And you've just essentially gone into a hypnotic trance. And with regard to Buddhist meditation, you're going to be more awake. You know, that's what you're going for in Buddhism. You're trying to wake up as much as possible. You know, the word Buddha itself means awakened. So yeah, if it's making you more oblivious to everything except for maybe just this laser pinpoint on some object, then yeah, in all likelihood you are just going into a trance. So try to be as aware of everything, even though, I mean, you're not really focusing on it. And if you're like in a really like a deep mystical state, you'll still hear the ticking of the clock, but it's just going to be passing right through you without any kind of resistance. You're not going to be focusing your attention on it. It'll just be like an image in a mirror that's just there so long as it's there, and when it passes away, it passes away. But you're not completely oblivious to it because it's all just part of the whole sensorium, and you're just aware of that all pretty much all at the same time. So it's not like you're really ignoring anything. So that would be my answer to Johnny Anan. And next question is from PK, who asked a few questions here. Do you really consider being poor and staying poor of any help with spiritual progress? Well, for starters, I would point out that two of the wisest spiritual teachers known to the West, namely the Buddha and Jesus of Nazareth, both strongly advised voluntary poverty to anybody who wants to be enlightened or to follow a spiritual path. And my experience is that, yeah, voluntary poverty is beneficial, or it can be. It's not necessarily beneficial. Like even in the Buddhist texts, there were very wealthy donors who made relatively high attainments, like Anathapindika, or there's one sutta where it's talking about how a person can live in a mansion with a beautiful wife and eat excellent food and just surrounded by luxury, but if he's not attached to that, then there's no problem. Whereas there's a guy living in a hut with an ugly, bad-tempered wife, and he's just eating, beans every day. And if he's attached to that, then that's a problem. So the main reason for voluntary poverty is it just decreases your opportunities for attachment. Although a lot of people, especially in the West, if they're poor, they've just been conditioned to be ashamed of that and to be upset or dissatisfied with their poverty. And so it just causes like a vicious circle or something. But overall, yeah, I mean, if the Buddha and Jesus of Nazareth both agree that if you really want to live a spiritual life and make progress and get closer to ultimate reality or God or whatever, then simplifying your life works very well. That's one of the main things you should do, just live a simple life. And it's easier to live a simple life if it's just kind of thrust upon you through your own poverty than trying to live a simple life when you've got millions. But as I say, it's just kind of a general trend, and there are some rich people who make great attainment, and of course, most poor people they don't make great attainment. So it's just one, I don't know, I wouldn't want to call it a gimmick, but it is kind of a, um, in general, it tends to be more beneficial than harmful to live in relative poverty. And both the disciples, the chief disciples, like the most serious disciples of the Buddha and Jesus, were told just don't even use money. At least in one of the Gospels, he advised his apostles not to handle money. So, next question. Is mindfulness helping you in daily life despite the disappointment of not achieving the Big Bang awakening experiences many serious practitioners develop a craving for? Yeah, mindfulness is it's invaluable really, because if you're not mindful, then you're just going to be a slave to your knee-jerk habits. Like there's something that causes irritation. Let's say just barking dogs bug you. So if you're not mindful, then you're just going to be bugged and you're going to be all pissed off and bitching and moaning about the barking dog, or just going out and like trying to shoot it or something. Whereas with mindfulness, you can detach from that, or just anything like fear or worry or anger or anything. If you have mindfulness, then you can detach from that. You observe it as a phenomenon that is arising, not as you. You know, instead of I'm afraid, where then you can just like, you know, freak out or wallow in it or something, just continue to stress out, go into some kind of downward spiral. Then if you're mindful, then you just see fear as arising. It's not you, because if you are anything, you are the observer and not the thing being observed. And so you watch the fear arise, and because you're observing it and kind of detaching from it and kind of putting it at a distance, you know, putting it on the other side of you to look at, then it doesn't control you anymore, or at least it doesn't control you nearly as much. And you are weakening the karmic momentum that caused it to arise in the first place, because you're not reinforcing it, you're not feeding it. And so it's maybe a little weaker next time it arises. So that sort of thing, I mean, no matter what you're doing, it's 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 good for you. If you're a layperson, it's just as good as if you're a monk. And as a layperson, it will be more difficult to cultivate deep samadhi states, but the mindfulness is always there. The opportunities for mindfulness are always there, no matter how busy you are. For example, the teacher of SN Goenka was Uba Khin in Burma, and he was like a government, um, relatively relatively high up government bureaucrat who was lived a very busy worldly life, but um, he was still like an adept at mindfulness meditation. And so it doesn't really matter what you're doing, you can do it mindfully. No matter what you're doing, you can manage to do it mindfully. And so no matter how busy or hectic or worldly you are, you can still practice mindfulness. And just driving your car or walking or brushing your teeth or eating is hard, because you tend to want to indulge in the pleasure of eating the food. But anything that you do can be done mindfully, regardless of whether you're a monk or a layperson. And it's just as easy for a layperson, except the monk is reminded to do that more often and has less distractions to kind of lead him astray. But so long as you aren't led astray, then the distractions themselves are just more grist for the mill, and you can just be mindful of all of it. So yeah, it has been helpful to me, and it continues to be helpful to me. And also, just like, let's say you're in a relationship with another person and they're in like a really bad mood, and they're being cranky or something, and want, maybe sort of like argumentative. Then if you're mindful, then you can avoid being sucked into it, and then you can be like this sort of the bedrock of kind of peacefulness that kind of helps to ground the other person, and it avoids the whole thing turning into a fight or some such. So yeah, mindfulness is it's just the panacea. That is, I mean, you can't have too much of it. With regard to even samadhi, you can have too much samadhi, but you can't have too much mindfulness. Too much samadhi and you just zone out and just go into this state of bliss, and you're not really making progress. But you just cannot have too much mindfulness, and anybody can cultivate it. It just takes the will to cultivate it. So let's see, where am I? Okay, next question from PK. Psychokinesis. That's not the question, that's PK. Bad joke. Are you open to experimenting with mindfulness and concentration techniques, mixing and matching intensity and quality of attention to the standard Vipassana noting? I think my answer to that question is I'm not exactly sure what the question means. Mixing and matching intensity and quality of attention. Whoa. Well, I mean, I am open to experimenting, and a lot of the meditation techniques I have practiced over the course of my career as a meditator have been just worked out through trial and error, and just it worked for me, and so I went with it so long as it was working. So yeah, I mean, I have been open-minded and not really just locked into, just following verbatim cookbook fashion what the book says. Although I've done that sometimes too, because generally the cookbook instructions do have some validity to them. But still, you have to be flexible and use your intuition and your inspiration, and find what works the best for you. But yeah, the basic answer to that question is I don't understand it. Next question, also from PK. What's the value of venerated scriptures and slogans if they are not directly, easily related to experience, but turn into topics of speculation and debate? Well, obviously, any scripture that isn't helping you to wake up, or helping you to be a good person, or a contented, blissful person, or a peaceful person, yeah, its value would be very limited. The only value of something like Abhidhamma, for example, which has almost no practical value that I have seen, beyond what is contained just in the basic suttas, is it gives you kind of a belief system that maybe is like a wholesome belief system, maybe more wholesome than a previous belief system or some other mainstream belief system. So that's one of the basic reasons for religion in general, is it just gives you a belief system to kind of to use it to navigate your way through life. And then some belief systems are better than others, and everybody has to have one until you become completely enlightened, and then even then you're going to appear to still have one. So but with regard to the stuff that's theoretical that you can't really prove, it's just dogma. If you can't verify it through your own experience, then that's just dogma. And to some degree you have to rely on it. I mean, if you want to take somebody's advice with regard to what enlightenment is like, then you find someone who you think has a good likelihood of being enlightened and listen to what they say. But still, you shouldn't insist upon anything that you can't really prove, which would pretty much rule out a lot of Christianity, and also a lot of the new social justice stuff. So yeah, just if you're going to insist upon something, at least be able to verify it. Let's see. The value of venerated scriptures and slogans if they are not directly, easily related to experience, but turn into topics of speculation and debate. Well, speculation can be fun, philosophizing in that regard. And but I mean, debating something that you don't really know, but you're just repeating what you've been told, that's a stupid way of going into a debate. So yeah, yeah. So you should try to be as dogmatic as little as possible. Just try to have some experiential support for your philosophical beliefs. And if you don't have experiential support, it just sounds like a really elegant theory or something, then you shouldn't be insisting upon it. And maybe debating somebody would be good just for exposing the weaknesses of your own point of view. That would be one of the best reasons for debate, is just no point of view that can't stand up to an all-out attack is a point of view worth keeping. So you should expose your own point of view to the criticisms of others and not just protect it or get angry if somebody's like finding fault with your point of view. Just put it out there and let it get attacked. And if it just gets torn apart, then it was not the best point of view to have, and so you're better off having it torn apart so you can maybe try something else. Okay, next question, and we begin the merciless, relentless onslaught of questions from Dog Breath. And I'm not complaining at all. He asks good questions. So, Mr. Breath says, I recall reading somewhere that it's possible to self-ordain as a Buddhist monk. Is this so? Well, from the Theravada point of view, the answer is nope. You have to be ordained by at least 5 monks. In the Ganges Valley, it's 10. You have to be ordained by at least 10 monks. They all have to be in good standing, and it all has to be done according to the Pali formulas. So yeah, you'd have to go through an ordination ceremony. With regard to like some of the Mahayana schools, I have no idea. But yeah, with regard to Theravada, no, you cannot self-ordain. Only the Buddha did that. So next questions. Next question, please explain skandhas, and in Pali that's khandhas, and how to get rid of them real quick. Yeah, well, the khandhas, the 5 khandhas, are what all human beings are composed of, the 5 aggregates. Usually khandha is translated as aggregate. And we're all composed of 5 of them, which is Rupa Khandha, which is just physical matter. Our body is Rupa Khandha, supposedly. And then there's, and I might not get this even in the right order, but then there's Vedana Khandha, which is feelings. Vedana Khandha, which would include like emotions and just like physical sensations, that kind of thing. Then there's Sanya Khandha, which is perception. And that is just the meaning of the existence, you know, that you've got objects with meaning. You know, you're living in a world of different objects and phenomena that all have their own meaning, even if it's just this thing that I don't know what it is. Still, that's your identification of it, is that thing there that I don't know what it is. So everything has to be perceived, has to be viewed as in something distinct that has some kind of idea associated with it. Then you've got let's see, Sankhara Khandha, which according to the suttas is mostly karma. It's volition. It's essentially will. It's like the motive force of your mind. You know, it's like the Vedana and the Sanya, the feeling and the perception is kind of like the static aspect, whereas will is like the kinetic aspect. So in a way, you have sort of like the spatial aspect and the temporal aspect of the same phenomena, at least according to my interpretation. And then finally, the 5th khandha is vijnana khandha, or consciousness. So you've got form, feeling, perception, essentially will, and consciousness. And let's see, where's the question again? Please explain the khandhas and how to get rid of them real quick. Well, how to get rid of them real quick? I mean, yeah, that generally doesn't happen. I mean, you could blow yourself up, but even then, like I was saying earlier on, you just, the very next moment, you just take a rebirth as a new being with your own new set of 5 khandhas. And even an enlightened being like the Buddha himself, after he became enlightened, then at least to external observers, he still had the 5 khandhas. So it's not so much a matter of getting rid of them real quick or real slow. It's Mainly just like attenuating your attachment and identification with the khandhas. Because even after enlightenment, ultimately nothing changes, which is the great paradox for me. So, yeah, I explained the khandhas, I hope, but the getting rid of them real quick. I mean, even the Buddha didn't teach that. Maybe an enlightened being could just look into your spirit and just see exactly what you need and do that. And maybe you're close enough to full enlightenment that he can just say something and it clicks, and poof, you're enlightened. But still, um, technically speaking, at least to external observers, you're still going to have the body and the feelings and the consciousness and all that. So next question from Mr. Breath. Did the Buddha give any direct talks or directions about sex to either monks or lay people? Well, sort of, kind of, but my according to my recall, my memory of things that the Buddha has said about sex, he's mainly saying don't do it. I mean, if you're able to be celibate, then you should be celibate, and if you're not able to be celibate, at the very least, you should keep the five precepts and avoid like sensual misconduct, which generally means you settle down with a nice person of the presumably of the opposite gender who loves you and you are faithful to that person and you love each other and yeah, I mean that is still relatively wholesome. You know, you're at least you're still keeping five precepts, but with regard to monks especially, I mean obviously monks are supposed to be celibate, so the Buddha would not be. I mean, he advised the monks to just avoid women as much as possible. Don't even look at them. I remember there's one sutta where Ananda, who always had kind of a soft spot in his heart for women, asked the Buddha, you know, what to do about women, and he just says, don't look at them, don't see them. And then Ananda's like, well, what if they're like, um, let's see, what was it? What if they just stand right in front of you and they're like talking to you and everything? And I'm already misremembering this, but I mean, ultimately, he just gets to just be very careful, be very mindful. So um, yeah, I mean, in Theravada Buddhism, especially, I mean, you're not going to find any sex manuals or, you know, and there's no tantric stuff taught. So, yeah, mainly the instructions or talks about sex, the directions about sex is, if you're able to be celibate, it's best to be celibate. But if you're not able to be celibate, or for whatever reason you have commitments or something, then yeah, just refrain from sensual misconduct and you know, don't be indulging in promiscuous wantonness with prostitutes or so forth and that kind of thing. So yeah, it's Theravada Buddhism is a very non-sensual kind of approach, which can run headfirst into Western culture and crash. So, next question from Dog Breath. Why did Buddhism die out in India? That's a good question. And there's like two aspects to it. First of all, um, it started becoming kind of decadent. You know, it was becoming more and more just it was developing in the Mahayana, which took over most of India, I'm pretty sure. And when India was predominantly Buddhist, even. And it was just becoming really weird and esoteric. There's all these, you know, a lot of the Tibetan stuff originated in India, and it was just getting really weird and esoteric and just deeply philosophical, so that most lay people couldn't really relate to it much anymore. And the main centers of this new kind of Buddhism that was developing in India, it was centered in Buddhist universities. So those were like the I don't like the intellectual heart of this new kind of Buddhism. And then what really finished it off, of course, was the invasion of the Muslims into India, who essentially just exterminated the Buddhists there. And the Buddhists were more committedly non-violent than the Hindus. The Hindus at least had some like military heroes, like Krishna, for example, who they sort of set an example that you can be a good Hindu and still fight. You know, the whole Bhagavad Gita is on that theme, at least at the the basic level. You know, it could be interpreted more spiritually, but you know, it's essentially Krishna telling Arjuna that it's better for him to fight than not to fight. So the Hindus had that, the Buddhists didn't, and the universities just got wiped out and sacked, which kind of destroyed the intellectual centers, and the people were already kind of drifting back towards Hinduism to some degree because the Buddhism was becoming just too esoteric and intellectual and everything. And yeah, what just finished it off was the Muslim invasion, and it was essentially genocide. And the Buddhists who didn't just convert or die left as refugees. A lot of them went to Burma. A lot of them went to Tibet, which was one of the reasons why Tibet became predominantly Buddhist. And fortunately, the Muslims didn't have a navy, so they couldn't get to the island of Sri Lanka, or Ceylon, Lanka. And so through good karma, I suppose, Theravada wasn't wiped out when most of the other schools were wiped out in India. So let's see, next question. How close to early or original Buddhism is Theravada? Well, of the schools that exist today, it is all in all things considered, it is by far the closest, which is the main reason why I became a Theravada Buddhist, because I wanted to get as close to the original Buddhism as I could. You know, I didn't want to be following some mutation that arose 1,000 years later. So of the ones that exist today, then Theravada is as close as we get. But there are differences, like only about half of the Tipitaka would be called core texts. So only about half of the Tipitaka goes back to before the schism started. Like even before Mahayana arose, there were supposedly like 30 different schools of so-called Hinayana, you know, lesser vehicle, the earlier kind of Buddhism before the Bodhisattva concept and all that arose, the way it did in Mahayana. So let's see, where was I going with that? Oh yeah, well, some of the texts they had all in common, which indicated that those texts predated the schisms, and then some of the texts are very different from each other. Like with regard to Abhidhamma in Theravada, only Theravada had that version of Abhidhamma, which indicates that that version of Abhidhamma really did not become scripture or canonical until after the schism started, which indicates that the Buddha didn't originally teach it. So you can use certain kinds of detective work to weed out some of the later developments. And there's a lot of scholarship expended on that, especially in the West, because the Burmese are more fundamentalist. They want to believe that the Buddha taught all of it. So, but some Western scholarship does investigate. Let's see. Yeah, it does investigate like what the original Buddhism was likely to be like. And if you really want to know what the original Buddhism was like, or they're very, very ancient, read the Atthakavagga of the Sutta Nipata. That's the biggest chunk of really archaic Buddhism still in existence, as far as I can tell. So that would give you a good taste of what the original Buddhism was like. Just read the Atthakavagga. And there are also some other suttas in the Sutta Nipata. The Sutta Nipata has some later suttas in it, but it has a lot of really, really ancient ones. So that would be a good way to find out. Let's see, next question from Dog Breath. Of the early sects, which was the closest? I have read that there were a few that were very conservative, and again, just through good karma, I think. Theravada was one of the closest ones, one of the least progressive schools of Buddhism. It was one of the most conservative schools of Buddhism. There was another supposedly Hinayana school that actually was like a reform movement. So it wasn't really super ancient, but it was trying to get back to the ancient roots, and it was called Sautrantika, which means it's just the sutras. They avoided any kind of like Abhidhamma kind of stuff, you know, any kind of superfluous or like extraneous development of philosophical concepts. They didn't have much use for that. They just stuck with the old suttas. So the Sautrantika school also would come close, like Theravada In some ways, it would come closer because it wouldn't have all the Abhidhamma stuff and probably not nearly so much of a commentarial tradition. Because modern Theravada, in a way, it's more Buddhagosism than Buddhism, because the commentaries are the final word on the meanings of the suttas. So if the Buddha says red, but then the commentary says, well, when he said red, what he really meant was blue, then the orthodox position, like for the very orthodox Burmese Buddhists, is blue, because when the Buddha said red, what he really meant was blue. And there is some of that kind of stuff. And I call that Buddhagosism. So, yeah. So I guess of the ones that I know of, Theravada and the extinct Sautrantika school came about as close. So if you want to get closer than Theravada, first you just dispense with the texts that are after the core texts. And like I say, maybe you study really ancient stuff like in the Sutta Nipata. So let's see, next question from Dog Breath. Please explain dependent origination. That's a dirty question. That's not playing fair, because even the Buddha couldn't explain it. Like according to the ancient tradition, after the Buddha became enlightened, he almost just became like a Pacceka Buddha. He was just gonna not teach Dhamma. He was just gonna be a hermit and mind his own business, because he figured nobody would understand dependent co-arising, or dependent origination, as Mr. Breath calls it, Paticca Samuppada. But of the explanations of dependent origination, or dependent co-arising, possibly the best explanation I have come across is not Theravadan. It's by Nagarjuna, like the Mula Majjhimaka Karika. If you really want to understand dependent origination, it would be worth your while to study that, I think. And in a way, he gives lip service to the 12 Nidana theory. According to Orthodox Theravada, there's the 12 Nidana theory, and I'm not going to go into it, but it's just this causes that, and that causes this, and this causes that, and that's like the whole cycle of samsara is based on this kind of thing. But I think that's a later development. The 12 Nidana theory is probably a later development, and that was not the original meaning of dependent co-arising. But dependent co-arising is so hard for some people to understand, that it just got turned into this formula that just got memorized by rote, and then you've got monks think that they understand it because they've just memorized the 12 links. But like Nagarjuna says, the whole essence of dependent co-arising is that nothing has an individual self-existence. Everything exists only in relation to the conditioning of the context of everything around it. So nothing exists as an individual self-entity. It's just a conditional kind of like a virtual existence. And so Nagarjuna even went so far as to say that dependent co-origination is the same as emptiness, because everything is empty of an individual essence. Every individual thing, or every phenomenon that seems to exist, only is there because of just the context of everything around it. That it has all these causes that exist outside of itself, and so it really does not have this inherent self-existence, and that includes us personally. That's one relatively wise definition of no self, explaining no self, that nothing, including us, has an individual self-essence, that we seem to exist conditionally because of all the conditions that are causing us to seem to exist, and that's as far as it goes. So rather than spend 2 hours just wallowing in dependent co-origination, which even the Buddha couldn't really explain effectively, because still almost nobody understands it, even though it's considered to be one of the most important fundamental teachings of Buddhism, I'll just move on to Mr. Brett's next question here, which is as follows. I hit a wall with my meditation practice, but have found death meditation very helpful. Which meditation or meditations would you recommend from the suttas for a beginner or an experienced meditator? And I assume he is asking which meditation or meditations on death I would recommend. And The main one for monks in the Buddhist time was you go to a charnel field, which is just like a cemetery for the poorest of the poor, where the corpses are just flung out on the ground to decompose and be eaten by animals. And yeah, that's not much of an option anymore. They don't have those in the West. So it seems to me that the best kind of meditation on death is just to expose yourself to death, just to um, somehow find, if not images of dead people, just like actual corpses. Go to probably like funerals aren't the best because in the West, like the dead person is just made up. They're wearing makeup and got their best clothes on, and they look like they're asleep and everything. But just reminding yourself every day that you're going to die. I mean, that's a pretty strong. That's like a powerful way of kind of kicking yourself in the ass in a wholesome dharmic sort of way. It is considered to be one of the great protectors. Is just recollecting that you are indeed going to die. But I mean, you can like have like skeletons and stuff around. You can get like a human skull or a fake human skull. But I mean, after you've seen it 50 times, it's just like a picture on the wall and you don't notice it anymore. So whatever it is, you're going to have to keep it fresh in order for it to continue having the effect. And yeah, if you don't have any good corpses to contemplate, then yeah, you might be looking in like gruesome areas of the internet or something like that, if that's really your thing. But just reminding yourself that you are going to die is, I mean, that in itself is pretty potent contemplation. Next question. Is it possible to find Buddhism anywhere on the planet that resembles what the Buddha taught? Out in the forests of a Theravada Buddhist country like Burma or Thailand or Sri Lanka, you may find very serious monks who are really trying to follow the original spirit of the suttas. And yeah, they do exist. It's not going to be mainstream. And I don't know if you could find it in the West just because the culture is so radically different in the West. So if you want something that comes as close to what the Buddha taught, you'll have to go to a culture that is relatively close to the culture of ancient India in the Buddhist time, like the Ganges Valley. So Sri Lanka or Burma or Thailand, just out in the rural areas, the small villages in the forests, there are places where there are serious monks who are really trying to do their best to really follow what the Buddha taught. I was doing that for quite a while, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. Next question. Do you believe Buddhism in its original form or its traditional Theravada form has any place in the West, or do you believe it is destined to be watered down so as to be unrecognizable? Well, the outward form of it just doesn't fit the West. The whole ancient Indian part of it, the cultural part, and a lot of the beliefs, just like the cosmology, that sort of thing. Yeah, it's really not going to it's not going to fit. It's not going to fit the West very well because science is more reliable. Even being politicized and taken over by the cultural Marxists in the universities and all that, it's still more reliable than the Buddhist cosmology, the flat Earth floating on water with the 10 million mile high mountain in the center and that sort of thing. So the best we can do is try to get just the essence of it, which is really just awakening. I mean, the awakening is always on tap. We're always completely immersed in ultimate reality. It's not even a tenth of an inch away from us. So anything that helps us to wake up, I mean, you can call that Dharma. And it's not necessary for it to just adhere to an ancient Indian way of going about it, because the ancient Indian way was adapted to ancient India, and we're not in ancient India. So I am sure there would be forms of Buddhism or forms of any kind of Dharma that would be better than Orthodox Theravada, simply due to the outward form of the Orthodox Theravada, which was adapted to fit ancient India instead of the modern West. So yeah, exactly what form that will take remains to be seen. You've got people like Eckhart Tolle who are teaching a kind of amorphous sort of Dharma with almost no emphasis on rules of discipline or morality even. Um, and for a lot of people, that may work best. Different people need different techniques or different approaches, and it's better to have a variety of different ways of going about cultivating wisdom or waking up, because one size does not fit all. Some um, basic principles may apply to everybody, but yeah, different people follow different routes, and there's just more variety in the modern West. We're more individualistic. So, like in a place like rural Burma, out in the villages, pretty much everybody thinks pretty much the same. You know, they all share pretty much the same worldview, and so there's a lot less divorce and that sort of thing out out in places really like traditionalist cultures, simply because there's less irreconcilable differences, because you know pretty much everybody shares the same kind of attitudes with regard to a lot of stuff, whereas in the West we're more individualistic and more sort of alienated or atomized or something like that. So um, yeah, you're going to need more of a flexible and variegated approach to waking up, and different people will just have different things that work for them, more so than in the Buddhist time or in even like modern Southeast Asia. So let's see. Do you believe Buddhism in its original form? Okay, so yeah, the best, most important part's just the fundamental essence of it. Yeah, that applies everywhere. Just it's just universal. But you know, just like desire is the cause of suffering, that kind of thing. I mean, you can't just throw that out. But especially the outward form of it, like the actual worldly appearance of it, is going to have to be different to some degree. And yeah, getting rid of the brown robes and that kind of thing would make sense. And so the last question by Mr. Brath, which is a joke question because he's a wise guy. If you decide to reordain, do you get your trailer back, or do you have to wait another 20 years for one? Well, I'm not going to reordain. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty certain of that. But yeah, I don't know. I probably wouldn't, if I was reordained, I wouldn't come back to here, even though this pavilion is very nice. The statues are nice. So yeah, I wouldn't get the trailer back because I don't even want the trailer. Okay, next question is from Airmid. I don't know if I pronounced that right. Airmid asks, can you talk about death and dying, the mind states best associated with this time? What conditions the next rebirth, and have we some control or impact on our next rebirth at the time of death? If you can think of relevant suttas to read, that would be helpful. Thanks. Okay, well, the relevant suttas I won't read now because I didn't even bring the book. I forgot to bring the book that I was going to read for a different reason. Um, but yeah, we've talked about death and dying a little bit already. The mind states best associated with this time would be the wisest possible states you can have, because, like I said a little earlier, the most important moment of your life, from the Buddhist point of view, and probably from the Hindu point of view also, is your last conscious moment, because that is what determines what direction you're facing, what direction you are headed, going into your next existence. So that's why, for example, when Mahatma Gandhi got shot, he said, "Hey Ram," you know, that was like the last utterance that he made before he died. And it wasn't like in the movie with Ben Kingsley where it's, "Oh God, they got me." No, it was, I mean, he was saying, "Hey Ram," he wanted his mind on God. He wanted his mind directed towards God at the moment of death, because that would be most helpful to him, to his spirit after death. So from the Theravada Buddhist point of view, if a person is dying, then certainly they should be reflecting upon good things. Like a common bit of advice is if someone is dying, then the monk or whoever is sitting by their bed with them would urge them to remember like one of the best things they've ever done, you know, like the most meritorious deeds they've ever done, so that when they're dying, their mind is on this really wholesome good thing and they feel good when they die. Because if you've got like a positive sort of a light mental state when you die, you're going to be heading in a more positive light direction. Whereas if you're all like freaked out and or something like that when you die, then you're more likely to wind up going in a dark direction. But let's say, for example, you've got a saintly person, he's lived a very good life, and then right at the very end, like he gets tortured to death or something, and so even though he's lived a really good life, he's like in a really bad mental state at the moment of death. So that can cause him to go in a downwards direction, but still all that good karma is there, so that the downwards direction will be very much mitigated, and it probably won't last very long, and then he'll go back up again, or whatever the metaphor is. So yeah, so the best advice when you die, try to be as calm and as either positive or neutral as possible. Just try to be as awake and conscious as possible. So don't don't get stinking drunk and crash your car into a telephone pole, something like that. Try to be, I mean, if you can't be in a positive mental state, maybe just being unconscious would be best. I'm not sure about that one. I'm not sure how that would work. But yeah, that's essentially it, is your last mental state. You should be living your life preparing for that. So next question is from Chaplin. What are you most looking forward to in meals after not being allowed to feed yourself for 30 years? Being subjected to mostly Asian curries and jungle gloop with insects. Yes, I have eaten insects. How will you dine, and what are you most wanting to eat or cook yourself? How will I dine? Yeah, I gotta try to avoid making the obvious kind of sensual sort of remarks here, but I will be eating lots more ice cream than I have been eating over the past 30 years, that's for sure. And yeah, more bread and cheese. I'll be eating oatmeal, I think, a lot. Organic oatmeal with butter and honey and maybe some dried currants or something stirred into it. But yeah, food is really not like a major attachment for me, so I'll probably still be eating pretty Spartan, aside from the ice cream and the occasional apple fritter. Next question from Chaplin. What are your teaching, content creation, and Dharma plans a few months down the road after you get settled in South Carolina? Well, I'll still be writing the blog and doing this kind of stuff, so long as I still am getting questions. I'll still be answering them, and maybe doing a few other kinds of videos. And if I'm not too busy working for a living, then I may actually write a book or two. Like there was the Neo-Cynic Manifesto, or just a kind of spiritual autobiography. I assume would be interesting, considering that I have lived kind of a strange life, like 13, 14 years just meditating in caves. Let's see, and yeah, if I'm actually like handling money and able to move around without the handicap of not handling money, then yeah, theoretically there could even be like retreats or something, and I'll be able to meet with people more easily, that kind of thing. So we'll just have to see how it goes. But the content creation and yeah, that's not going to change a whole lot, I hope. Dharma plans, yeah. Well, best not to have too many plans with regard to practicing Dhamma. It should be like spontaneous, like dancing or something. But, I am going to have intimate interaction with another human as part of my Dharma. And next question. What can we as supporters do to help you through your big transition? Well, yeah, I don't want to be too cheesy. I don't want to be like Dr. Steve Turley, just uh, just shamelessly hyping myself and asking for donations and that kind of thing. It's always very cringy for me. But yeah, I essentially just getting enough money to feed myself and pay the rent would be the best kind of support I could get at first. Plus, I mean, the moral support is always appreciated, and those of you who are already supporting are also much appreciated. But yeah, I mean that's really um, as much as I hate to say it, then the best kind of support that I could receive making the big transition and essentially starting from scratch would be just moral support and maybe a few bucks after I'm allowed to start really handling it. Okay, next question is from Zane, and we're almost done. Okay, Zane is the last questioner, and his first question is, it seems to me your focus on following the rules of the closest to original Buddhist practice you've been able to find has been primary, and your focus on following the rules of Vinaya has been the primary self-identity as being a monk. How now will your definition of being a Buddhist change or remain the same upon disrobing? Well, I mean, I didn't really identify most with following the rules, although being a monk really is a matter of Vinaya, because, I mean, the monk is ordained through Vinaya, and he's pretty much, I mean, a monk is essentially defined technically as in accordance with Vinaya. Even if he drops out, it's in accordance with Vinaya. So, I mean, that was just sort of a technicality. I wasn't really identifying with that primarily, although I was trying to follow the rules strictly, just as a matter of like conscience and just trying to be as straight of a monk as I could manage. But for for a Buddhist in general, or a Theravada Buddhist, traditionally the definition is anybody who takes the three refuges and the five precepts. You take the refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and then you keep the five precepts of no killing, no stealing, no wrong speech, no sensual misconduct, and I've already got that in the wrong order, and no no wine, ale, or intoxicants which cause cloudedness of mind. So, I mean, just believing that Buddhism is is a good and wise system and that you're trying to live in accordance with that would probably be good enough that you could call yourself a Buddhist. If you believe, some of the fundamentals, like karma and, the Four Noble Truths and that sort of thing, then, yeah, that would be helpful. And with regard to me, I'm just kind of amorphous, I'm like a liminal being, and defining myself kind of locks me down. So I'm just going to do the best I can and try to be spontaneous and try to cultivate wisdom still and try to um, be as open to this ultimate reality or ultimate truth as I can manage. And yeah, so my definition of being a Buddhist for me isn't going to change that much because I really am not working with the definition of a Buddhist for myself anyway, or even really like as a human being or anything. So yeah, it's when you define something, you kind of lock it down, and I'd rather not be locked down very much. So yeah, although it's true, it will be like no rules, five precepts still, I suppose. But even that, I mean, I'll probably break some of the five precepts sometimes. Might have less compunction about swatting mosquitoes, for example, if they're biting me. Not like I'll go out hunting mosquitoes, but I do have the right to strike out in self-defense. And who knows, I might even share a bottle of wine with my sweetheart sometimes. You never know. So, next question. No doubt you'll follow the Panchasila, which he has in parentheses here, Shravakayana precept, spoken like a true Mahayanist. But how much more leeway will the new situation provide you? Well, yeah, that's pretty much it. Just the five precepts as sort of like the template for proper behavior, and that would be it. Other than just always trying to be as awake and mindful as possible, and never just giving up. And even if your back is turned on Dharma, I mean, you can still feel it back there. That your back is turned on Dharma. That's still a kind of mindfulness, even when you're living in the world. Is even when you just don't want to think about it, you deep down that you don't want to think about it, and it's still there. So yeah, I think I reached that point long ago. I don't think I could ever just completely go back to just being completely blue-pilled in the matrix again. So last question. What will set your parameters for your new self-definition as a Buddhist? And yeah, I think I pretty much already answered that. I'm going to avoid self-definition as much as possible, although I do think that Buddhism is the best philosophy of life that I've come across. And I do believe that the Buddha was, in all likelihood, I can't prove it, but in all likelihood, an enlightened being. And I will still be what's the word? Striving in my own way, even though I won't be striving in a monastic way. I'll still be, wanting to be as awake as I can manage, and wanting to cultivate wisdom and to understand reality and know the truth, and if possible, help others in the same endeavor. So yeah, self-definition is self-limitation. So you're probably better off if you don't define yourself very much either. And that's it. That's the last question. So I hope I didn't bungle this too badly, and I hope everyone at least got close to having their questions answered. And if you have more questions, then we can do number 9, and I can still answer these. Even after I'm not wearing this brown toga anymore and not sitting out in the nice pavilion with the Tweety birds. Although people might think that my ability to answer questions will suddenly collapse or something if I come on wearing a shirt and with maybe even hair longer than 1/4 of an inch. So yeah, if you have questions, feel free to leave them down below in the comments, or when I do make the announcement on Subscribestar, if you have access to that, then you can leave your comments there too. And be happy and have a nice day. And maybe I'll see you. No, I keep saying I'm going to see you next time, and actually I don't see any of you guys because I'm just looking into a camera. Gotta tell the truth. I'm not going to see you next time. So goodbye.